When I told my wife that I wanted to become a Muslim, my wife, who had been a devout Christian her whole life, she told me, Sean, I will never become a Muslim. And it hurt me a bit because I didn't want to do anything to jeopardize my marriage. A few weeks later, when I traveled to Edmonton, I shared with some men, including a local imam there in Edmonton, that I didn't know how to approach this with my wife. And the brother told me something that was so profound. He said, Sean, do not try to convince your wife to do this. He said, it's more likely that you will mess it up than anything else. He said, but I do want you to trust that Allah will guide her heart. When I got home from Edmonton, this is in early January, just not that long ago, I laid both of those copies of the Quran on my dresser, not because I was like low-key wanting my wife to find them. I just didn't want them to get bent up in my suitcase. I was so exhausted from traveling that I went to bed like at 8 p.m. When I woke up almost 12 hours later, my wife had grabbed one of those copies. She's a professor, a doctor.
Yes.
She had already, through the night, she had already read almost half of the Quran. When I woke up, my wife said to me something that was so shocking. She said, Sean, I think we should become Muslims. And there's a powerful lesson there. Like most Americans, most of what my wife knew about Islam, she learned from places that you don't want to learn about Islam. If what you know about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, you learned from the news, if you learned it from movies, if you learned it from social media, it will be misinformation. And my wife, who's an intellectual, a voracious reader, first thing she said to me was, Sean, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he is not who I thought he was.
Wow.
And she was just moved by his life and his example. And she was also, she thought that to become Muslim, it meant you no longer had any reverence for Jesus. And I think most Christians think that.
Yes.
And it was actually quite the opposite. And when she saw that to be a Muslim still meant to have nothing but reverence and love for the Prophet Jesus, it changed her. And for the next 6 weeks, she and I were on a really beautiful private journey that we didn't talk about publicly, of just saying, what would it look like for us to make this big move in our lives? And so 3 weeks ago today, the Sunday before Ramadan, we took our Shahada, and it's just